right, so y'all that don't know me, I'm Russell Hedrick, first generation farmer, and I don't know, it's been an interesting year, so I put a little bit in here about Western NC. It'll only be a couple minutes, but to give y'all an idea, this is where we call home. I live in Catawba County. So Catawba County got really lucky. We only had about 20 to 25 inches of rain in about a 24, 36 hour period. It was about a 1,500 year flood. But to show y'all kind of what farmers went through and the people of Western North Carolina. So this is actually not number one when we made it up to the mountain, but this is essentially what we had to drive through to even be able to get close to people to start looking for them. We were doing search and rescue. We ran search and rescue the first night till about 4 a.m. the next morning, and essentially using drones is really cool. As a farmer, I like drones. We've been using them. We had no idea that even some of the technology, so working with Best Way, I learned a lot of the stuff that these drones can do. Like when we would fly our infrared at night, you can actually tell if somebody's in a house even at 2 o'clock in the morning because of the vent pipe coming through the roof. We can actually tell a heat difference. And so we had a thing on our controller that we could click. It's a little blue diamond. Essentially it would link to Flight Hub, and it would give us a longitude, a latitude. We could make notes on there, so if somebody was outside, we could literally type in how many people are in this house, how many people are stuck, and it would send it, an hour away back to the command center and tell them, hey, there's 8 people in this house, and they found them at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the next morning they could go get them. So the first night that we were up there, this is 226A, and it runs from Marion to a little town called Little Switzerland, and then Spruce Pine. If you've watched the news, there's been a lot about Spruce Pine. But we were able to find roughly about 100 people that first night with our search and rescue, and pin those people. And then the next morning, the USAR team went in, and by about lunchtime that next day, they had about 100 people off the mountain. And this is kind of the roads that we had to deal with. I'd just say that the people took care of the people is how it worked out. It wasn't a lot of big government in the first week or two. It was people on Facebook saying, I've got a skid steer, I've got a small excavator, we'll come clear the roads so you can get in and out. And I don't think anybody understood there weren't any roads to clear, they just fell off the mountain. This is Jeff Clack. He's one of Best Way's guys. He came up from Florida. I'll pick on him a little bit if you want to stand up for a minute in the back. He knows what I'm talking about. So this is Sam Thier, and Sam is the person that called me right when this first happened. And he works for Best Way. Sam lives in Wisconsin. So we had a guy drive down from Wisconsin essentially nonstop. We had a guy come up from Florida, which is Jeff Clack, and then one of Best Way's team members is Jake Harris, and he came up from Alabama. And that's Jake right there. And then this is me and Jake. This would have been our second or third day. We were up there in Spruce Pine, still trying to look for people in mudslides during the daytime, which was quite a bit more safe. This is actually up on 226A, so this is in McDowell County, but just to give you an idea, that creek right there used to be about 10 feet wide. They still haven't fixed that bridge, and it's been almost 2 months. This is like our drone team, so you've got Jake Harris, and then there's Sam. If you notice, we're not standing too close to each other, because after about 9 days up there living in a drone trailer, we all kind of smelled kind of funny. This is Mike Howard. He was actually a paramedic where I was a fireman at, and he's a drone operator, and he wanted to come up and he helped us. There's me. This is Preston Cave, another farmer, Jeff, and then this is the fly cart that we were using to essentially pick up the loads and carry them into people. Then we had Brian Walker and his girlfriend came down from Kentucky. He's also a farmer, but they were shuttling us food and water and helping make our bags up. And this video is about 2 minutes long. I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on. Right now we're on Guerin Creek. So essentially everything that was on the mountain flowed through Cane Creek and ended up in Guerin Creek. If you heard about a dam potentially rupturing down in Rutherfordton, it went right down there below us. But we're on a road called Owensby Cove Road, and we essentially set up in this person's front yard, and we would take trash bags and we would put 60 to 80 pounds of MREs, water, non-perishable foods. We did a lot of baby powder and a lot of baby formula. And just so y'all have an idea kind of what these people are fighting against, because there's some places like this that helicopters couldn't even fly into because of the terrain. And just having a drone, now I did cut this video a little bit short, but when it gets to the guy's house that we were flying to, which I think this one was about 1.5 miles, 2 miles out, we could literally drop a package of food at their front door. I mean, we would be within probably 50 feet of their house. So a person could come out, pick up their bag, go inside. We would be reloading another supply bag and making that drop again. But the reason I showed y'all this is it is a huge honor for Blake to recognize me for that award. But there is a whole team of us that was up there at the same time sacrificing and making sure that people got what they wanted. And I just kind of want to recognize the team too, that we all worked together and we all made this possible. But it's just about to the end. But you can see, you know, think about if you were up there stuck. I mean, that's one of the reasons, you know, people ask me why we did it. At the end of the day, we were about 20, maybe 25 miles away from this being us, and I would have hoped somebody would have come and helped my family too. But we're still flying around the mountains, and this is just one bag drop, which it's really cool that the drone technology will do it. But down here's the house that we're getting ready to go to. I'm pretty sure, weren't you the one flying the drone, getting the footage on it? I really thought this was going to be a little quicker.
It's important to note that we have flown drones up there to find these people and mark locations like you had just talked about.
Yeah.
So the person operating that drone there knew right where to go.
Yeah, so we could take like the small like the small drone he's got out there, the 3M, so we can put a speaker on it and we could actually communicate with the people. You know, we could also fly it up there and like he's saying, we would drop that pin like I was talking about when we found people. And so essentially Sam dropped a pin right here and it logged his flight path, and then the big drone could essentially follow that same path and go back to the correct house. But this guy right here, he's like, I don't know, 70, 80 years old. But we were dropping it right there at his car. And every time the drone would come out, he would be standing there. We would drop the bag, and as soon as that bag dropped, he was getting it. Now, you got to understand, the guy that we were flying at this house hadn't had communication with another human being in about 9 to 10 days at that point, because cell phones didn't work. It was pretty wild up there. This kind of gives you just an overview of kind of what we did. So now back to farming. Now, thank y'all. Now back to farming. How many of you in here believe you can quit using fertilizer? 100%. That's still quite a bit of hands. I'll tell you my personal opinion. I think I can reduce fertilizer by 70, 80%. I think there's still a place. Conversations years ago between me and Gabe Brown, and y'all know the story. Gabe quit 100% all fertilizer, and that's great. But it rains 8 to 10 inches, maybe 12 if Gabe gets lucky in an average year, and their average corn is 120 bushels. I get 40 to 50 inches of rain. How many of you in here get more than 20 inches of rain? My idea is if you get more than 20 inches of rain, there's still a small place for right time, right rate, and right product. And you can still see a huge ROI without sacrificing environmental impact and without breaking the bank. So today we're going to talk soil health actually complements agronomy. Agronomy still matters in healthy soils. So this is where we started at. In 2012, we had this beautiful cover crop. How many of you in here plant cover crops? So this right here was a great experiment. We didn't understand how mixes worked. So the NRCS, they introduced me to cover crops. I absolutely loved them. We called green cover seed, and at this time they didn't have the smart mix calculator. And I don't remember who we talked to, but we said, hey, we want this, 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 and this. And I think because we told them what we wanted, they really didn't fight us on it, and so they shipped it to us. So we had 7 different species in this mix at 100% of the seed rate. Oh yeah, okay, a few people went down that path as well. It only took 3 herbicide passes to kill it all. I know TJ's already left, but if we get annual ryegrass now, we've been working with Saddle Butte because 2 lessons. If you use annual ryegrass, get a certified seed because you don't want different mixes of annual ryegrass in there because that makes it hard to kill. Number 2 is do not ever mix annual ryegrass with cereal grains, because when you go out there and you burn down, you'll kill all the cereal grains, and then the ryegrass comes out with a vengeance. And that's just some of the lessons we learned. And I mean, this is year number 1. The only reason that we planted this cover crop is because we had winter erosion and we had winter weed issues. And it solved both of those problems. We didn't understand nutrient cycling, any of that. But we had a good year because I think we killed it at this timing. Then we started looking at how do we set baselines. How many of you in here have ever dug and done an earthworm count on your farm? You should do that. It doesn't mean anything definitive. Like, it's not like you can look up here and say, I have 20 earthworms in a cubic foot and my soils are functioning at 80%. It doesn't work that way, but it's also a baseline. Are we improving? Earthworms, how many of you know that earthworms till the soil? Okay, so if we know earthworms are moving per million 80 to 120,000 pounds of soil a year, are we really no-till farmers? I mean, think about that. It's a trade-off. You heard Lance Gunderson talk yesterday. You heard Dan talk. We talked a lot about fertility management. If cover crops build fertility, are we farming without fertility? No. If we have earthworms that are turning that soil, do we have to? How many of you read the article about Marion Commer where we had nutrient stratification? I'm a first-generation farmer. I've been farming for 12 years, so I haven't been around the block a long time. But if you go back and look online, there's like 20 years of publications where they said they didn't apply P and K, and then they came out and said they did apply P and K, and it really confuses me. And then they talked about nutrient stratification, and Kleinschmidt is an excellent person to talk to. Are you still in here today? Find Kleinschmidt, talk to him. Great conversation. But nutrient stratification can happen. It typically happens in dead dirt. Nutrient stratification does not happen near as bad as they say in biologically active soils where you're using cover crops, where you're doing good regenerative practices, and earthworms are one of those things. So we did an earthworm count, and in 2013, I had 2 per square foot, or 2 per cubic foot. In 2023, this is Archuleta. We were working with David Montgomery on his new book, and we were one of the 14 farms that they did, and we were at 93, which is 2.3 million earthworms. That's huge for a lot of different factors. Nutrient cycling, moving residue up and down the profile, earthworm castings, water infiltration rates, and that's why I put it right here. Our water infiltration rate in 2013 was 0.5 inches per hour. And Ray actually pulled that. That was my first field day, was in 2013, and Ray did that little infiltration ring. It was a 1/2 inch an hour. Ray came out, and right here's the infiltration ring. 10 years later, we were at 16 inches per hour. Now, how many times, do we talk about climate change and weather change pattern? We don't get steady rains every 3 or 4 days anymore in North Carolina. I know y'all do in Iowa, and we all wish that we were here. But the fact that we aren't, we have to address that. But now we get 10 inches in a day, and then it doesn't rain for another 3-4 weeks. Well, that's great. I can capture all of that now. I have a huge sponge that can let that water into the profile, and we can capture it for a later time. And so these are just things you can do on your farm that don't cost you any money at all. Then we start talking about changes. You've heard a lot about the Haney test. It's really is a very comprehensive test that I have enjoyed. I really like. Anybody from university here? I'm not going to pick which university. Okay, you're good. We're going to talk about NC State. So looking at the Haney test, everybody always asks me, what do you look at on the Haney test? Right here are the first things I look at on the Haney test. This has nothing to do with fertility. Why? Because the fertility that's on the Haney test is a derivative of these. It doesn't matter what's on my Haney test, I can affect it more by looking at this. CO2 respiration, a 720% change. WEOC, the food source, 590% increase. organic matter increase. So over the last roughly 10 years, we've increased organic matter on average 5.6%. And everybody says, well, the university told me you can't increase organic matter in a lifetime or you can't build topsoil. Well, it depends on how you farm. And everybody's like, well, you're doing this with cover crops. No, we're doing this with cover crops and stuff, like more things. Like we're doing compost, we're doing manures. We're taking hardwood chips and putting that within our compost and building up that weock. I mean, there's tons of different things. There's factors that go into this crop rotation, but it is achievable. This is what our soil looks like now. So this is where we started. That looks really good, doesn't it? That's some good Iowa dirt, some of that black stuff. Then here, we're 4 years later. This is probably the first earthworm I think I ever saw on our farm. That's why I took a picture of it. But that's a 16-inch sample with a spade. And about 8 inches down right here, you can already see that we're changing the color of this orange and red clay that's high iron content, and we're starting to get a little darker. And now, 10, 12 years into it, we start to see stuff like chocolate cake. Now, it's really wild to me that the first time I heard Dan speak was yesterday, and he's talking about buying his, was that your first piece of farm ground? But the sandy one? Dan's talking about buying some sandy farm ground in Illinois, which I didn't know existed. And you can see in the bottom down there, you can see that lighter colored sand, and then he's just got this black soil right on top of it. And so having that black soil, he's doing some of the same things as in Illinois that we're doing in North Carolina. So then we talk about water holding capacity. So I'm pretty lucky that I farm predominantly these bottom two. Now we've got some sugar sand down in Georgia that we're doing, and it's pretty rough. But look at your inches of water per cubic foot. So we talk about organic matter increase, where everybody says if you increase organic matter 1%, you can hold roughly 27,000 gallons of water. Well, sand, it's more like 15,000. Silt loams, it's actually more like 35,000. So there's a change there in soil type, but every time we increase organic matter 1% on this one right here, and we're holding another 2.5 inches of water, that's huge for drought mitigation. This year we went 60 days with no rain in the middle of the season. We had neighbors that had corn that was 4 foot tall, completely dead, no ears, didn't even put tassels out, insurance wrote it off, and they were bush hogging it. In the state of North Carolina, there was roughly 350 to 400,000 acres of corn bush hogged by the end of July because it was dead. Now, at the same time, our corn has the holding capacity to go through those dry spells because we're holding more water, and we can go an extra month and a half past what our neighbors can now with our organic matter increase. And right here's how we do it. It is basic science. Just a picture of some of the covers we're using. Growing some of our own cover crop seed, put 10 acres in. It's not going to be your most profitable 10 acres, but I can tell you, you put in some cereal rice, some triticale. If you're going to want a mix of them, blend both of those together, harvest them at the same time, you can cut down on your cover crop seed cost. This is what it looks like when we look at high biomass. How many of you in here do nutrient analysis on your cover crop residue? There might be 10 people in the room. How many of you want to save money? How many of you want to make more money? All right, the coffee's kicking in. This right here, when we first started looking at cover crops, every publication we read said if you planted crimson clover, you should get 50 pounds of nitrogen. If you plant winter peas, you should get 80. If you plant vetch, you should get 100. Well, what you should get and what you actually get, those are two different things. Y'all remember that old saying about one hand in the other? Man, they're quiet today. Might have to get you up here on stage for a minute, Lance, get you to dance some. So this is what we do. We go out in a cover crop field. Doesn't matter how you do it. You just have to measure the square footage. We do 1 foot by 2 foot, so it's 2 square feet. We'll take a couple representations and we'll cut them off. It used to be that we had to dry them on a trailer before we sent it into the lab. Now, NRCS has the deal where you can do it in the oven and you can warm it up. My district conservationist did that and he almost got divorced for the smell. So if you have a woman at home with you, I don't recommend that way. But now with Lance, we can essentially take all this right here, stuff it into a garbage bag and send it to the lab, and all they need is what is the square footage that we took. And the reason we do that is this is what a cover crop analysis looks like. So Lance made a a comment yesterday about where we grew our 459 bushel corn that we didn't show a lot of phosphorus on our soil test. So let's look at this. Carbon to nitrogen ratio right here, the C to N ratio is 16.7. So what we have found out is you have to balance your carbon to nitrogen ratio. So if you live in Iowa and you get 30 inches of rainfall and you want to get the maximum nutrient benefit from that cover crop, the C to N ratio should be your rainfall to 1. So if it's in Iowa and you're at 30 inches of rainfall, 30 to 1. If you're in North Carolina, you get 40 inches of rainfall, 40 to 1. And what we have seen is at a 40 to 1 in North Carolina, I will get 80% of the nitrogen, 75% of the P, 75% of the K, and 75% of those micronutrients below that in that growing season. So if you're not combating resistant weeds and you don't need cover crops that are 6-7 feet tall and you need nutrients to push your crop along, that's one of your resource concerns. Balance that carbon to nitrogen ratio. You have two ways to do it. You either add legumes in with your cereals and you bring that C to N ratio down, or you have to terminate it at a smaller size. Those are the two ways that we can do it as farmers. So let's look at nitrogen. 166 pounds of nitrogen. Anybody got a calculator? Multiply that by 0.8. Man, where you at, Lance?
I'm back here, buddy.
Can you come up here and dance for a minute? So about 132 pounds of nitrogen. So if we were looking at this residue on this particular field, and we've got 166 pounds, our C to N ratio is below that 40 to 1 for me, I'm going to get roughly 132 pounds of nitrogen. So Lance was correct. It takes 0.7 bushels in every grain of corn, and they say it takes 1.1 to grow the grain and the plant. But does that mean that we have to apply all of those? It doesn't. Then we look at phosphorus. There's 47 pounds of phosphorus. That's not 47 pounds of phosphorus in the form of 1137O, 1034O, DAP, MAP. That's plant phosphorus. That's in the plant. It breaks down. It doesn't have to go through a biological process again. This will be available. What about potassium? How many of you have low potassium? If you're fighting potassium, triticale is one of the best. If you need extra potassium available for your crop, I'll show you the next slide, but our potassium in this was 232 pounds. Realistically, how many pounds of KCl would I have to apply to see 232 pounds of potassium? A dump truck load. So these are ways that we can take nutrients scientifically and take a credit for them, just like the Haney test. So here's one of the deals that Rick Haney did with green cover seed. And so this one is for potassium, and it lists the 5 best on the right and the worst on the left. So Rick's saying for potassium availability, Surge Spring Triticale was the best, Sun Hemp was the worst. I keep telling Keith Burns I'm going to keep talking about this until he puts it back up on the website, so here we are. I don't know if it's up or not, but I'm going to keep talking about it. They should have it for calcium, phosphorus, a boatload of the nutrients that we need as farmers. They went and planted cover crops and then tested it, and to see which ones are actually building these levels or actually hurting our levels, and so we can make comprehensive cover crop mixes. Then we talk about good old Malic 3. So here's where NC State comes into the picture. What year was Malic 3, 84 or 86? 84. So that's a year before I was born. So Malic 3 is a year older than me. It never should have made it through that many birthdays. So we've got Malic 3, and what we've done on our farm since 2013 is every year we pick 3 or 4 farms, we do Malic 3, and then we do Haney test. And then we actually follow the recommendations. And I know that's really hard for farmers to understand, but we actually followed the recommendations. So if you pull a Haney test and you don't follow the recommendations, can you learn from that? Because there's tons of farmers that say, man, I pulled a Haney test. It only called for 120 units of nitrogen. I didn't feel good about that, so I put 150 units of nitrogen on, and we went ahead and put hog manure through the pivot. And I was like, how much? Oh, like 4,000 or 5,000 gallons. What did you learn? Absolutely nothing other than you're a moron. Man, we're cooking. We've had a bunch of people ask us about base saturations. The reason we look at base saturations is 40, 50 years ago, they said it was a good thing to balance. If you balance how many of you like base saturations? All right, I'm not picking on y'all. I want to have a conversation. We're gonna interact this morning. Make sure y'all don't fall asleep. If you read a base saturation off of a false read and a false extraction, and those numbers aren't actually real, does it matter? Do y'all follow that? If we use hydrochloric acid and we extract all these nutrients out of the soil with something that never happens in nature, and we get a number that can never happen in the soil, does that matter? I get hundreds of people that called me and said, why isn't Rick Haney putting the base saturation on the Haney test? Why doesn't Lance Gunderson put the base saturation on the Haney test? And I bugged him about it, and it was 2, maybe 3 years ago, we were at a conference together, and he finally threw his hands up, and Lance was like, here's the calculation. So the base saturation on a millet on that particular field was like 71, 72% calcium, and on a Haney test, it was like 22. And he said, if you show that number to a farmer right now, they'll break out in hives and potentially catch on fire. And that's why he said he didn't put it on there. So my point saying, if you've used old agronomy and you've used P1 or Bray or Olson or Mielik, and you're used to looking at those base saturations, you're not going to get that on the Haney. There's no way to make that conversion without you breaking out in hives. So sometimes we just have to let certain things go. So NC State, now we're going to talk about the university a little bit. NC State, in all their grand wisdom, said with nutrient stratification in no-till that I should soil sample from 0 to 4 inches deep. How many of you in here farm a flower pot? I don't either. Why? Corn roots. Who's ever dug a root pit before? How deep were your corn roots?
50 inches.
How deep were yours? No, the maple lover. Yeah.
Over 3.5 feet.
3.5 feet. What's really one of the only two, what are only the two really big factors that affect corn root depth? Compaction and water table. Those are the two biggest things that we see restrict root growth. Well, if you've got tile in Iowa and you don't have compacted soils, you'll probably be like Gibbs back here and your corn roots are going down 4 or 5 feet. So if I've got 4 or 5 feet of profile to feed this crop, why am I taking, what does Iowa say? What's Iowa's recommendation? Probably 8 inches? 6. Why are we doing that? Why are we basing our fertility program, how much money we spend on a crop, on something that's in the top 6 inches when we know those roots are going down 5 feet? Now, it's not a 1-to-1. It's not going to pull the same amount of fertilizer out of the top 6 inches as it is the bottom 6 inches at 5 feet deep. But those nutrients are still available. We're still putting carbon in the system, microbial activity. So NC State came out with a Giddings probe. If you don't know what a Giddings probe is, it goes on the back of a tractor, and we were sampling 3 feet deep. Every one of my farms has been sampled to 3 feet. I thought that was really good till Nick Voss told me he overdid me and he went to 5. So let's talk about potassium. We've got 0 to 4 in the first line, 4 to 8, and 8 to 12. In the top 6 inches, we had 103 pounds of potassium. In 4 to 8, we had 57, and 8 to 12, we had 46. I had more potassium in the bottom 2 than I did the top one. Are my nutrients stratified? Not really. They're moving. They're going down. There's more below, and potassium doesn't move a lot. What about sulfur? We know that's a big mover. On sulfur, we had 24 pounds in the 0 to 4. We had 30 pounds in the 4 to 8, and we had 57 pounds in the 8 to 12. Do y'all think that to grow a 200 bushel corn crop that we needed potassium or sulfur? No. But if you read that soil test off of that 0 to 4 inch sample, it called for quite a bit of both of those products. And my grandpa was a John Wayne fan, and that's what I grew up a lot of time with my grandpa. And so when I think about NC State, it always makes me remember of his lifelong quote, if life is hard, it's harder if you're stupid. think about what you're doing. At the end of the day, if you're making the decisions for your farm, you got to make money. And so Lance talked about our soil test, and he wasn't off by much. Those are most of the average numbers that we see, but these right here are the soil test off of our 459 bushel corn. Phosphorus in the top 6 inches was roughly about 37 pounds. Potassium's 120 ppm, so that's 240 pounds. Calcium's not bad. Look at that calcium to magnesium ratio. A lot of people that took the master class the first day, and people we've been talking to, when we talk about base saturation and we were paying attention to that percent magnesium and what Dan talked about, me and him's even had those conversations, you start getting over 20%, you get tight soils, right? Well, a lot of that has to do with this ratio. So calcium to magnesium, we want that to be greater than a 3-to-1. If we see that wider than a 3-to-1, then we don't typically see tight soils. We've got enough calcium and we've got low enough magnesium, we don't see those issues. Sulfur, 20 pounds. Here's the big kicker right here, Haney test, nitrogen. How much nitrogen's in that top 6 inches? 70 pounds. That cover crop residue analysis that you saw, that was from our field, it said 2022 on it. So we had 132 pounds of nitrogen. If somebody wants to get a calculator, add these up for me while we're talking. We had 132 pounds of available nitrogen from our cover crop. The Haney test found 69 pounds of nitrogen available in the top 6 inches. And right here was the recommendation based on the 6 inches for corn was our nitrogen recommendation and our phosphorus recommendation, and it didn't call for any other nutrients on that corn for 425 bushels on that one. This is the 6 to 12. So that's another thing. We started on this farm at about 1.2 to 1.4% organic matter. Right now, that top 6 inches is at 7.5. And everybody said, well, you could be picking up residue. Okay, well, here's the 6 to 12. How much residue do you think's in the 6 to 12 in a no-till? It's up to 6.4. We're affecting the organic matter increase even deeper in the profile. You know, phosphorus on that one, 39 pounds. Potassium was a little bit lower. Sulfur's running about 10 pounds. Oh, sorry, I thought y'all wanted me to dance. Haney nitrogen in the 6 to 12, 61 pounds. So we had 69 pounds, 61 pounds, and 132 pounds. Who added that up? 262 pounds of nitrogen that's already available to that corn crop. And Lance said it. How did we grow this corn crop with only about 300 pounds of added nitrogen? That's it right there. Because if you add those two together of what I applied and what was there, how many pounds is that? 520 pounds of nitrogen was available to that corn crop. And that's even sandbagging it. I mean, you'll have to ask Lance about it. I don't know the definitive term, but I asked Rick Haney one time, I said, hey, you're making a nitrogen recommendation. How do you know they're not going to run out? He already has a buffer in there that he doesn't actually give you a full credit because he doesn't want an environmental issue to cause you to run dry and run short on nitrogen. So I just gave you 3 examples of scientifically how we were able to find over 200 pounds of nitrogen and cut that off of our program. Now on our base acres where we're going for 175 on some fields, 225 on some fields, this is how when we tell people we're only putting out 60, 70 units of nitrogen over an entire growing season, this is the way we do it scientifically. And all of the cost that was associated in all the things I just told you about with those 3 tests is probably what, $250, $3 an acre? It's a lot cheaper than buying that 200 and some pounds of nitrogen. Spend your money wisely. And then we talk about Haney test over time, setting those baselines. I showed this to Dan and Melissa yesterday. So 2013, this is on Rocky Ford Road, CO2 right here. The first year in 13, our CO2 burst was 101. We had no-till and cover crops. We went up to 113. Had no-till and cover crops, 134. And then when we go from 2015 to 2016, it goes from 134 to 495 on CO2 burst. Well, let's look and see what it is now. 2022, look at that. We're still cooking about 414. You know, this farm started 80s and 100s, depending on what field it was. And we can follow all the way here and go all the way back to 2013 and see where we were. And we can go all the way through the years. I just haven't added in 18, 19, and 20 here. But how did we have this huge increase? Animal impact. Do you have to put a cow on every acre to get animal impact? Absolutely not. Put manure. Take manure and compost it. Some of the things that we're doing is we're taking chicken litter and we put 200 pounds of wood chips, hardwood chips, per ton of chicken litter and compost that. After it goes through the heat process, we'll go out in the native forest and we'll go 2 inches deep and we'll get a loader bucket and we'll put 1 loader bucket of dirt per 20 tons of that compost. What did we just do? We pre-inoculated it with native biology that then consumes and multiplies in the compost, and then we put it out and you start seeing stuff like this. There's 100 different ways to skin it. Then Liz helped me do some Haney testing. We did this whenever, Marion came out and talked about nutrient stratification. Every one of these are 2-inch increments all the way down to 12 inches. Well, notice how 0 to 2 and 2 to 4 are very close. Then the next 4 inches are very close. Then the next 4 inches. Our soils are functioning in almost 4-inch zones. But there's not huge differences. I mean, you're talking from the bottom to the top, there's probably a 9% difference in change. That's not big. At least it isn't to me. Same thing here, looking at organic carbon, organic phosphorus, phosphorus availability. Organic matter. Look how close organic matter is in the top foot. I truly believe, I can't prove it because I don't go out at nighttime, because if I fall down in the field, the earthworms will pull me down in the soil. But I'm pretty sure this is from earthworm activity. I mean, there's videos out there, they set up cameras where they'll grab corn fodder and literally pull it down in the holes. I think we see a lot of biological activity that's moving this organic matter because I'm not disking and moving this ground. So Gabe Brown likes to talk about his cocktails, and David Brandt, love him to death, I always like to talk about his radishes. I want to tell you about my corn. How do we enhance nutrient uptake? How many of you in here apply phosphorus fertilizer? How many of you feel that you do it really efficiently? I'm not even one of those yet. So we'll keep y'all entertained here. So Kleinschmidt, if we apply phosphorus in the fall and we go through a year of farming and we do like a 2-year removal rate application, how much of that phosphorus is available in the second year? Maybe 1%. What is the most expensive nutrient per pound that you apply to your farmland? Phosphorus. So, how many of you in here feel like you make enough money in farming? That's exactly right. It's hard work. We work 20 hours a day. Some days we don't sleep. We stay in the tractor. We run all night. We try to farm the best we can. And at the end of the day, I want to make as much money as I can. So why limit yourself? If we're talking about phosphorus, you might get 10% the first year. You're lucky to get 1% of that leftover 90% in the second year. Potassium, it's just weird. It really depends on the soil. Like the sugar sand down in Georgia, you put potassium on and it will leach. It's weird. You can see potassium move 6-8 inches in a year, but it doesn't do that in clays. Some of the products we're using, Fed and Happy. Met Dan. Dan's telling us about his vermicompost. I don't have enough time to do what Gibbs is doing, but he built some really cool boxes where he can make his own. I can buy it from Dan for 50 cents a pound. I put 2 pounds of vermicompost with 1 gallon of water in a tote, mix it up, pull it out. It's an extract, and we add that with our Furrow, and it costs me $1 an acre. Organics has been a good product. The thing that we talked about yesterday in our Haney Master class is if you're looking at PLFA, you need to find a biological to fix the missing links. Like, I don't have a bunch of protozoas. I don't really have huge saprophytics, but I've got a bunch of bacteria and fungi now. So if I need a product, or if I'm going to look at a biological, I need to find what's missing and try to help that. I just don't need to throw something blindly. PGRs, we're running those in furrow and over the top. And the biggest thing for us that we've been working on the last couple of years is banding. Reduce that soil surface. So the reason that a lot of our fertilizers are inefficient is we're taking 100 pounds and we're broadcasting that over 2 million pounds of soil in the top 6 inches of an acre. You heard Lance say it the other day, if you've got 15,000 pounds of potassium, are you really going to move the needle with another 100 pounds? Probably not. But there's ways to unlock that, and banding is one of them. So we started with, I don't remember the number, it's an older Yetter model Coulter. It was the 17-inch ones. They didn't have the parallel arms. And we ran those for about 3 or 4 years. And then Andy and Jeff Worley talked to them, and they recommended these 2996s. They run a 20-inch Coulter. I grow rocks. I know y'all don't do that here in Iowa, but we do have those in North Carolina. And so running the ones with the parallel linkage, if I hit a rock, it'll let that one Coulter go up and over the rock and not lift my entire bar. And so ahead of planting, we're running 3 inches on either side of the row, and we're placing our P and our K. We did biologicals this year. Just a picture of it out running in the field. Everybody told me that it wouldn't work in cover crops and it would be this horrendous thing. And I will say that you have to set these knives very, very close, and you have to tighten these bolts really, really tight, because when you're running in stuff that's almost as tall as your tractor cab, it can have the ability to wrap behind that knife if you don't set that knife correctly. We broke a few knives after, I don't know, close to 1,000 acres. Called Caleb, and Caleb got me a new heavy-duty knife. If you're going to be in no-till ground, that would be the knife I would recommend, is that heavy-duty knife. It seems to last a little bit longer. But we're essentially running this bar on beans. We're going about 4 to 6 inches deep. Beans don't have as good of a root system as corn, so we put it in that 4 to 6 inch zone for beans. And corn, we're going 6 to 10, depending on the field. We have some fields that have enough tilth and enough aeration that we can run it that deep. And that does two things. In North Carolina, when it gets really hot and really dry in the summertime, I lose about 80% of my moisture in the top 4 inches, even with cover crops. We don't get that rain charge that refills it. Well, if we remove the moisture from the soil, what does that do to the nutrients? They're unavailable. So that's why where we started using these soil probes we use, and we started seeing that moisture loss, and then we started seeing the EC change, and we saw those roots going deeper. That's where we started coming up, hey, I can't strip till my ground because of the hills I farm, but I can run a no-till Coulter on there and not see washing. And so we can place these nutrients down there where we're maintaining more moisture, and we're seeing those later season roots. And that's one of the ways that we're affecting yield without throwing the sink at it. Another thing that we do, if none of you have ever been in North Carolina, we've got a product called Sundrop. The natives call it redneck nectar. So what you do is you imagine buying a Mountain Dew and concentrating 3 of them together, and that's what Sundrop is. And y'all can laugh at me if you want to, but that's 3 bushels to the acre. It's crazy some of the stuff we've tried, but we take Sundrop and throw a little bit of it in the in-furrow. It's the sugar. I mean, I'm pretty sure I know what it is. It's the sugar. But try something. I mean, go buy you a 3 liter of pop, throw it in the in-furrow, and put you a check strip in and see how it works out.
We use Bush Light up here.
Bush Light?
Yeah.
Well, I get the microbes drunk and let them have a party. We used to run a 2x2 on the planter on the front, and when we incorporated the cover crop rollers, I can't remember the number, 26 somethings? Is Andy? 2968s. We started running these where we're running our 2x2 on both sides of the row. We've ran probably well over 100 different closing wheels. We went to the Yetter twisters, and they've done really good for us. But running this fertility on both sides of the row, especially in high biomass cover crops, you remember what we talked about, we're going to tie a lot of nutrients up in stuff that's big. So if I have weed pressure issues and I'm trying to get a really big mat and suppress those weeds, I'm also removing a boatload of nutrients. So if we can band those nutrients, we can cut down and we increase in the efficiency. So this is the first, well, I thought it was going to play. This is the first cover crop roller that we ever got. We got it from Finning Equipment, and this is the, I guess maybe generation 1. It had rebar on the bars, and I can tell you right now, I've never cried in farming, but I came close to it that day because I didn't have to roll down this cereal ride and have nosebleeds anymore. I could just put this on the planter and roll it in one pass. We've upgraded on the new planter. We still run these on the other 6-row, but we've got the new ones with the torsion bars, and we've been running those for 3 years now. But essentially, we started doing the economics. For me to buy an I&J roller, run another tractor pass, depreciation on the equipment, and all of that stuff was costing me about $12 to $14 an acre. And we figured those numbers up back in like 2015, 16. I'm sure they're higher than that now. And so it doesn't take a lot of acres to pay for a set of roller crimpers that we could mount directly to the planter. Plus the time savings and the labor savings and the equipment depreciation, it adds up pretty quick. Now this is what we've got. If y'all didn't pay attention there, that was a Kubota tractor. I used to fit inside of a Kubota tractor. I did that for 2 seasons. And I can tell you what every square inch of that cab feels like. Now we've got the John Deere. We've upgraded to the new torsion bar system. It does a good job. It rolls it flat. If you're trying to cut back on herbicide and chemistry, you can get roughly a 90+% kill on all your small grain. On legumes, it doesn't really kill vetch the best. It doesn't kill all of our clover the best, but at the end of the day, one of the things I learned from Ray Stiers, if you have a vetch plant that takes up a square foot in an acre and it didn't get killed by a crimper, did that really hurt you? Probably not. He was kind of a purist. So Ray Stiers, how many of you have ever heard of Ray Stiers before? Y'all enjoy this then. So Ray Stiers lived in Reidsville, North Carolina. At this point in time, I'm farming about 200 acres, and Ray was having a lot of health problems. He was an older gentleman at the time. So Ray asked me if I could come help him. He could get on the tractor with my help, but he couldn't get on and off the tractor and fill up things, and that's what he wanted me to. Like essentially, he was the brains and I was the dummy with the strong back. And so Ray told me that he had an Alice Chambers planter, and it was a plate planter. Now at this point in time, we had just put on V-set, V-drive. We had just put on all these cool new toys and picket fence stands. And when I Googled this is pretty much the picture I got. And I was like, oh my God, that thing was made out of the Titanic parts. But I didn't want to be the young farmer that messed his crop up. So I spent all night, like, how much graphite talc should we put in this thing? What disc we need to be running for what seed size was. And so we're out here planting Ray's corn. And I noticed something, and I take this picture. There's no-till cultures. This down pressure spring is broken, and that one's good. That one's broken, that one's good. The other 2 row units didn't even have springs on them. And I turned around, I was like, Ray, did you know your down pressure springs were broken? He's like, yeah. I was like, when did that happen? He's like, sometime in '86. And I'm sitting there thinking like, man, that's like $5 worth of springs. I just dropped $35,000 on updating a planter. And I'm like, there's no way this could work out. Ray Stiers used no phosphorus and no potassium for over 20 years. His sons are doing the same thing now since he's passed, and he was growing 150 bushel corn. Maybe sometimes we buy things that they're safety blankets, maybe, like row cleaners. Do I need row cleaners? Maybe not. But I can tell you right now, I'm not going to the field without them because they just make me feel better. And that's okay. But at the end of the day, if you want to Ray Stier it, you can grow 150 bushel corn like that. So then we started looking at seeding depths. How many of you in here grow corn? All right, leave your hands up for a minute. How many of you plant over 2 inches deep? How many plant over 3 inches deep? Man, y'all got to get lively. You got to try some new things. So 3 inches is actually really good. And the reason I say that is we started looking, I met a guy named Nick Voss in Kansas, and we started talking about corn genetics. So essentially we plant that corn seed, First thing comes off is your mesocotyl and then your nodal roots. These are some of your main feeders right here. So if we're looking for plant stature, standability, nutrient movement, all of that, we can affect that just with seeding depth. And so what I'm saying is you plant corn 2 inches deep. Has anybody planted corn 2 inches deep and went and counted how many nodal roots you had? Y'all want to share? It's about 3. Typically you get about 3 nodal roots. You go 2.5 inches, you'll pick up a 4th. You go to 3 inches, you'll be pushing 5 or 6. We moved that corn seed down just 1 inch and we doubled nodal roots. I've planted corn down to 4 inches deep. And we did that in a very select farm that had good soil aggregation, and we had about a 10% stand loss. But the corn was so good, it actually made up for that stand loss. So start thinking about depth. I'm not saying every farm in America should be planted that way, but if you're doing soil health principles and you're building soil aggregation and soil tilth and you don't have to worry about that crusting issue, you can start moving that seed a little bit lower and see a huge impact to that plant health. So we talked a little bit about 2x2s, where we used to run one, we used to run, now we run 2, and this is why we do it. So the one on the right here, that is a single 2x2 disc, and all the nutrition would be over here on this side, and if you count those, there's 9 roots on the right, and there's 1 root on the left. Is that plant going to maximize yield? No. Because what's going to happen is you're going to use nutrition and water 90% on this side and 10% on this side, and you've wasted the other 90% on this side of the plant. But when we look at running 2x2 systems, look how even those are. I can't count all of those, but essentially it looks fairly even to me. There may be just a little bit more in this clump than that one, but that's fairly evenly distributed. So now those roots are going to proliferate on both sides. So even how we apply the nutrients makes a difference. Corn coming up in cover crops, if you've never seen that before. Some weird dude holding some plants. So we do a bunch of different plot work. So the plant on the left is organics mixed with in-soil algae and vermicompost extract. This plant is organics and in-soil algae. This one here is Calfa added in with the first one. So essentially you have organics, in-soil algae, vermicompost, and you have Calfa. And then here is just normal fertilizer. Can y'all tell a difference? I mean, is that pretty easy for y'all to see that? So organics at this point was $6 an acre. In-soil algae was, I think, around $7, and the vermicompost was $1. So we've got about 3 bushels invested in going from this root system to this root system. That's a massive difference. And some of these products, like I called the guy from Organics last year and I was kind of pissed off, kind of like what Dan said yesterday. And I said, I've been no-tilling, composting, manuring, cover cropping, I'm doing all this stuff, and I really didn't think their stuff would show any results. And I put it out there and we saw a pretty good increase, and it made me mad. But then I realized that was just showing me, even as hard as I've been working at building these soils back, we're not there yet. Like if we can still use some of these products as a Band-Aid and help push some of these crops along while we continue to build soil health, that's just showing me that we haven't reached our plateau yet. There's still more to go. So do some of these plots on your own farm. We go out there, I mean, we're doing the TV show now with Top Crop, but we go out and we dig plants. Like if you grow a corn crop and you're not going out and checking varieties and checking different things and different products that you're trying, I mean, you've got to get out there and dig. See what these roots are doing. Look at that plant stacking. I mean, literally it's the size of almost a 50-cent piece. That we're trying out different biological products. We're trying out different ways to put fertilizer out. Get out there and dig. Another place that we dug here, Liz Haney came to the farm. We had our field day this year in September, and Liz came out there. We dug this root pit, and every time we dig a root pit, I learned something new. Like Liz started showing me where we're actually building topsoil. You could see over the last 10 years on that farm where I had actually already started building topsoil that was over what was there before previous. And you could see it with some of the residue, that essentially soil was covering some of that residue and it was moving down. But look at that dark layer right there. I mean, you talk about North Carolina having red clays and we're starting to see all this black start to show up. That's changing a soil series. Looking at soil temps, where we have cover crops, 77 degrees. About 10 feet away, 93 degrees. This was in the middle of July. Think about biology. Think about that water savings. And so once again, we're here to NC State University. If y'all don't know, I love them to death. So we wanted to do a corn trial, and I was told that tillage would make my crop come out of the ground better. I would have a better stand instead of doing no-till and into cool soil. So all of these plots are no-till except number 2, and number 2 is the triangle. And so what did we see? Where we did tillage, the crop really did come up better, I'm not gonna lie. Germination, crop stand in about the first 2 to 3 weeks actually looked better than no-till. But where we applied no fertilizer nitrogen, it yielded about 80 bushels. Where we applied 50 pounds of nitrogen, corn yield went up to 125. 100 pounds of nitrogen, we were up about 165. And 150 pounds of nitrogen, we were making 190 bushel corn. And that really did show fertilizer response to that crop. And I thought we'd really done something. And I'm showing this to Rick Haney at a conference. And he was like, you know what, as smart as you are, you're really dumb. Man, they went to sleep on me. And I said, why is that? And he said, because over here with no nitrogen, that tillage plot only made 90 bushels. And I said, yeah. He said, what are these? In our no-till cover crop plots with no nitrogen, we had 130, 155, and 180 bushel of corn with no nitrogen at all. Completely missed that. And that goes back to the things we've been talking about all morning. Cover crop. Pull a residue test on it. Find out what nutrients are in it. You can pull a Haney test, see how much nitrogen is in it. It's not that the corn grew with no nitrogen. It just didn't need to be supplemented. And we were seeing yields that were above county average, even with no nitrogen. This is a really cool one. haven't told anybody about this except for Sam. Did y'all know if you take a blue LED light and you run it over a corn crop at night for 0.2 milliseconds, it will actually kick the photosynthetic rate back up on that corn plant at night? Anybody ever heard that before? Fun stuff. How many of you have Snapchat? Okay, how many of you have an iPhone or an Android? Download AI and start asking it the dumbest farming questions you can think of. Heather probably thinks I'm cheating on her, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm on my phone asking AI, like, what color lights make photosynthetic power turn back on in a corn plant? Green actually goes the deepest in the plant, but blue actually gets the best response. Ask AI. You can get publications you'll never find on Google, but we put these LED lights on. This is our plot sprayer. We put these on the big sprayer. I can't say what we did with the drone, but I can say it's pretty cool. I just don't want FAA to call me. But essentially, when we're spraying at night, having this blue light for 0.2 milliseconds will actually kick the photosynthetic power back onto that plant, and it can still pull photosynthesis off of moonlight. Like, just fun stuff to try on the farm. These lights cost 50 cents a piece. That's $1 a nozzle. I had more in the wires than I did in the lights. And we've spilt fertilizer and all kinds of stuff on them. They've actually survived pretty well. But just cool stuff you can try on your farm. Make a 90-foot pass. Kids get on your nerves, send them out there with 2 lights and tell them to shine it on every corn plant. Have fun with farming. Then we start looking at one's healthy soils, one's not. So it's not even though that it's bad. So on the left-hand side of this picture, this is no-till. That's our normal practice in Catawba County. Chicken litter, fertilizer, spray it, kill it, put it all out. On the right-hand side, that was behind a 7-way cover crop mix with livestock integration. It was definitely a much better soil after about 3 years of using regenerative practices. Which one of those would you rather have? The one on the left is 56, 58 pound test weight corn. The one on the right was running 62, 64 pound test weight. Then when we started working with David Montgomery, how many people have heard that nutrient density is better in regenerative foods? That's too much of a blanket statement. Because if I tell you I have more nutrient density, that just means that my protein is 12% and the national average is 9.8. That doesn't really mean anything. But when we started really testing with David and we started seeing higher beta carotenes, which affect eye health, we started seeing higher vitamin C's, we started seeing higher iron content or higher zinc concentrations. That's how we actually make food that positively affects human health. So this is Magnus. This is Heather's little boy that is now my stepson. This is his first time to a cornfield. This was back in 2022, just some pictures of the corn we're growing. I mean, you can literally see from my waist almost down to my knee. I mean, we've had some really good success with healthy soils. You can too. It just takes a little bit of time and a different management strategy. Looking at stalks. I talk a lot about corn because I like it. Ear size. This was actually from our contest plot in 2022. Had a couple ears from there. If you've never seen it before, it was 1.02 pounds. And that's after black layer. I mean, we were growing, 0.7 pounds for a couple years. We got up to 0.9s. Now we've got ears that have weighed over a pound. Don't tell the USDA because they'll tank the market. So, looking at different products. How many of you have ever dealt with drought stress? I've only got 1 year data on it. I didn't put a bunch of stuff up here. I'm telling y'all about it if you want to try it. There's a product called Kelpine that Corey Atley at Advanced Yield sells. The plant on the right, we put Kelpine in furrow. The plant on the left, we did not. We went through a 60-day drought period this summer, and I could tell you down to the row where we had the Kelpine and where we didn't. The stress mitigation on that was pretty awesome. We're going to do more years of these just to see, even in the soils where we're building more organic matter and we're building healthier soils, that we can still see changes like this. That's pretty awesome to us. But you can look it up. It's got kelpines and terpenes in it, like a cactus extract, I believe. Then we start talking about nutrient cycling. So how many of you, when I first started farming, I was watching Ag PhD, I was watching all these publications, reading everything I could, and everybody was telling me, like, you've got to get everything in that corn plant come out at tassel time. You've got to, are you Mega Dave, by the way? That's awesome. So me and him met through TikTok, by the way, just so you know that. There's a connection there. We got to talk afterwards. So, hey, if y'all don't know, if you got TikTok, go find Mega Dave. But this right here is what we started looking at years and years ago, is this curve, the very first one. This is your first yield limiting factor in corn. And so the cool part is you look, so from essentially V6 to V10, from planting to V6, we've only used about 14 pounds of potassium. But when we start looking from V6 to V10, it goes from 14 pounds to 165 pounds. So how many of you think that your soils can supply 150 pounds of potassium in 14 days? There's very, very few. If that's your yield limiting factor, we can wide drop, we can foliar spray, we can do all kinds of cool stuff. Well, this is really cool, but this right here is only 4 nutrients. This is NPK and sulfur. So I met these really crazy people from Florida, and we started building a project together called Foliar Scripts. So ag-wise, transparency-wise, and Sarah took our data, their software, and essentially we figured out a way to map out all 14 nutrients across an entire growing season. And what we also found is the limiting factors. Look how much iron from planting time, where we're coming out at VE to V4, look at that iron uptake. 50% of the iron is what we found in that just 4-leaf period. Potassium, same thing. Look at that potassium uptake, almost 50%. Nobody talks about this over here though. Let's look where we're at. R3, 45% of the copper, 55% of the zinc, 60% of the manganese and sulfur are at R3. How many of you go out there and manage your corn after tassel? How many do it all the way to R3? There's not a lot of that. There's a few. But at the end of the day, if you have moisture and you're having a good growing season and you manage that crop correctly, you can add bushels for not a lot of money. Like when we're managing sulfur, let's go back and look. All right, so here we are at V6. We've used 4 pounds of sulfur. All the way through the V stages, we've only used 16 pounds of sulfur. How many of you apply your sulfur at planting time or before? Why? It's easy, ain't it? Stabilizing nitrogen, I can get behind that. But in North Carolina, when we make that nitrogen pass and a little bit of P and K in the spring and March, everybody throws their sulfur in there. We get 20 inches of rain during the growing season. Is that sulfur there at tassel time? Probably not. We've moved it too deep in the profile. But look at the difference here. So when we go from tassel to R4, it goes from 20 pounds to 120 pounds. What we started doing is we're taking a drone and we're broadcasting AMS over the top right before tassel. We've been doing that for 3 years now. I have sulfur. You saw the Haney test. I have sulfur in my ground through biological processes and cover crops. So that extra sulfur I need, there's no reason for me to put it on in April. We'll put it on right before the tassels come out. We still get rainfall typically towards that end of the year, and it'll get that sulfur in there and fill it out. But we've mapped out all these nutrients that now in season, if I have an issue, it tells me down to the ounce of what I need to apply. How many of you have ever went out your corn plants? This one's from Minnesota. I'm going to pick on Grant for a minute. I hope he doesn't mind. Hey, Grant, where'd these pictures come from? His cornfield. I'm going to fast forward just 2 slides. If you pull a tissue sample, and right here is iron, and it's got 178 parts per million, and it says sufficient. Does that look sufficient? No. What's a plant's job? What does a plant do? We learned this in the 3rd grade. What does it do with sunlight? Photosynthesis. Well, that means the plant has to absorb that sunlight, correct? So this is the main leaf, the main vein coming up the leaf right here. And the first few off of it right here, these are dark green. And then outside of that, see how that's translucent? That's not capturing all the sunlight. You're losing photosynthetic power, nutrient uptake every second, every day that the sun is shining, that is happening. And we're correcting that for about $1 to $1.50 an acre with a foliar pass of iron. And the cool thing you'll see is this is a new leaf in Grant's cornfield. The lower leaves were completely dark. They should be. They weren't growing anymore. It was able to stabilize the iron that was in those lower leaves. But all those new leaves, that plant couldn't change the form of iron. We've got Fe3 and Fe2. We couldn't change that form of iron fast enough in that corn plant to where we were dark green throughout that plant. So it doesn't matter what you do. If you're not capturing sunlight, are you going to make yield? That's one of the key things that we started paying attention to. And this doesn't cost you any money. You can walk out to your field, see this problem, and you can address it for a couple bucks an acre. So this is what foliar scripts look like. So this is soybeans at R1. This is on the mobile app on my phone. So anything in green, I'm good. Anything in orange, I'm low. So like boron, we put in a 10% concentration of boron, and where we were at in parts per million, it said we needed just over 20 ounces to correct that plant. Same thing with zinc. You can change it. So my co-op sells a 9% zinc. Say your co-op sells a 12% zinc. All you got to do is hit this little white bar and slide it over to 12% and it'll readjust. But look at zinc. It only called for 4.45 ounces of zinc. How many of you here foliar apply? Every jug I've ever bought, and I'm not knocking on the fertilizer company, I guess they did the best they could, but every foliar fertilizer that I buy says apply 1 to 6 quarts. And I kept asking my fertilizer supplier, which one of those is right? And he said, well, it depends on if you're buying or selling. At least he was honest. They don't know. But we've had tissue samples for the last, 50 years? And we've never had a management decision on it. It was a guess. Well, we were, this deficient, and maybe we should put on, 2 quarts instead of the 6 they recommend, or vice versa. But being too high is just as bad as being too low. You start messing up some of these ratios and you'll mess a plant up. Well, now we can go out there and tell you that you can go in here, fix all these, and you can print this report off and you can take it to the field or the co-op. This is my V3 corn this year, but nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So our potassium was a little lower than where we wanted it to be. Well, at a potassium acetate at 24%, it called for 18 ounces. Everything else, like zinc, actually was running a little bit high. Boron, 10%, 4 ounces. Molybdenum, 3%, 2 ounces. Well, I went out there with Sam. I've actually got videos. When they were training me on my drone, Sam was flying this field. It cost us less than $5 an acre to correct that corn crop. If we can take these tissue samples and actually get this recommendation on exactly how many ounces we need to apply, does that save you money? I think the average farmer this year, we were spending 25 to 50 cents an acre. Well, if, let's just say potassium acetate costs you $9 a gallon and you're saving 2 quarts, that's $4.50 an acre. You've already made $4 back with one product. You know, these are things to think about, efficiency. The next 2 years, where commodity prices are and input prices are, efficiency is going to win the race. So corn, critical timing. We talked about this last night till like 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. Foliar, V3, because at V4, we're determining ear size. We wide drop at V4. How many of you in here put nutrients out at V4? Why? I'm going to put you on the spot, but why you do it? Huh? So one of the reasons we're looking at a wide drop at V4 is when Lance was talking yesterday and when Dan was talking and we were talking about nitrogen, what does nitrogen have to do after we apply it? It goes through the microbes. It goes through a process. So if you apply nitrogen today, is it available today? And it depends on where you're at. It depends on soil temperature, depends on biological activity. I can tell you for me it's about 10 to 14 days. If I put nitrogen out there for it to go through the conversion and we start seeing plant uptake on tissues, it's 10, 14 days. Well, what happens 10 to 14 days after V4? V6, 7, starting into 8. So V4, we're determining ear girth. V7 to V10, we're doing ear length. So if you have a farmer that goes out there and top dresses their corn at V6 and they need that nitrogen bump, do you think that they help that corn or hurt that corn? They probably were running a little bit low if they weren't, addressing those issues earlier. You've got to think ahead. You can't apply something to corn the day of. Same thing I said earlier with sulfur. We're putting it out at tassel. If you have moisture, don't give up too early. Now, obviously, if you're in a D3 drought, you don't need to be foliar spraying a bunch of these products. Yes, there are some that'll help with stress mitigation, and we'll use some of those we did this year. But looking at a full package, if you've got 7 or 8 nutrients are off, that's probably because you don't have any water. Think with your head. And we will manage corn all the way to R5. Same thing with beans. How much time do I got, Seth? 23 minutes. All right. So PLFAs. Lance talked about PLFAs. This is the first one that I could find from 2013 on Rocky Ford Road, and our total microbial biomass was 4,300. And then we'll look at there. 0.64 protozoa. That's a really good number, ain't it, Lance? Bacteria is really a lot higher than we see fungi. Let's go to 22. 7,021. Do you think that's a big change to go from 4,000 to 7,000? This whole entire conference, almost everybody that's been up here has told you, how do we move nutrients into the plant? Microbes. So if you can go from 4,000 to 7,000, that's a big deal. You don't have to have huge loads of nutrients in the soil if you can apply a little bit and you know that you can be efficient. This is your efficiency factor like Lance talked about yesterday. But still, once again, look, protozoa 13, that's really not that good. So that's why when we look at biological products, we want ones with protozoa in it. We see a benefit from that. So then we do trials. This field here added almost 40 hours, maybe 50 hours of work to my farming year. But we've got a check strip. We did Pivot Bio minus 40 pounds of nitrogen and the sulfur. Then we did Pivot Bio full fertilizer. We did organics. We did fish shit, in-soil algae. By the way, you can't say fish shit on TV. Yeah, we got to say fish it. And then we had a check strip up here that we put some Soil Revive in from Concept, but literally we put how much our bushels either gained or lost was and what our net return was. And we're just assigning a number. Like, these are things that you need to do on your farm. I can tell you all this stuff, but you need to do it on your own dirt. And yes, I know it's time consuming and sometimes it's not the funnest thing to do, but on your dirt will give you the best information exactly how these products are going to work. Another thing that we started doing is we added metagenomics. I met Josh Toll. We started looking at Rise Bio. So if you buy a biological product and say it costs $15 an acre, well, you're going to put it out there without any indication of how that's going to respond to your soil. So what we do is we send our seed, our soil, and the biological product to Josh, and we can grow it in the laboratory, and we can test it even before we use it. And so we know, are we going to increase mycorrhizal? Are we going to help the fungal bacteria ratio? One of the things I like the best is the polymer degradation. If you have a residue of a crop that has had 3 birthdays, you have a polymer degradation issue. Like, that is telling us how fast we can cycle that residue. So if you're having residue issues, that's one of the things you can look at right here. Phosphorus cycling, community evenness. Is it 250, Josh? Is he in here? Josh Toll? Yep. 250 a test? Yeah, 250. Okay. So think about that. If we're buying a biological product at $15 an acre, that's not a lot of acres to test it in the laboratory ahead of time to find out, is it going to be a benefit to my farm? Instead of spending, $2, $3, $4, even some of these, you buy a shuttle tank, some of these things are $6,000, $7,000. Do the test in the lab in the wintertime, see if you're going to see a response with your seed and your soil, and then make the decision whether you want that product or not. Just some picture of some corn this last year. This was actually taken before the hurricane. So that's probably, I think, the best picture I have of that corn crop in that field. Balancing carbon and nitrogen ratio. We talked a little bit about that in the hallway yesterday. If we're running a liquid nitrogen, we're putting some fulvic acid in it. If we use a dry nitrogen, we'll coat it with a humic acid. The pink right here is a product called Safe NBPT. We've been using it for 4 years now, and it's probably the best nitrogen stabilizer that we've been able to find for our farm. It's cheap, it's effective. Only thing I can say is do not get that on your hands, or it looks like you murdered somebody for about a week. It doesn't wash off. The big thing that I learned from Carolyn, and the reason I talk about it, is we were using a product called nitrane. And nitrane is a DCD. Essentially, it's a bactericide. So you put it on your nitrogen, it washes in the ground, it kills the bacteria, and it stops the nitrogen from cycling. It truly does work. The problem is what have we talked about this entire time? What do we need? We need those bacteria to cycle that nitrogen. So if we kill them, and it takes them a while to come back, that's not good. So we focus on polymers and the MBPTs up here. Talking about some of the sensors that we're using. This is a company called AquaSpy. We have a probe that goes in the ground 48 inches, and every 4 inches we're measuring root depth, electric conductivity, removal of nutrients, watering needs, and soil temps. This is what the sensors look like. So this one here is in our just standard no-till without cover crops and regenerative practices. Back here's the other sensor where we've got our cover crops. But look at the rainfall events. Where we had cover crops, look how many rainfall events that we were able to measure. Look where we had no cover crops and we had bare soil. What happened to these rainfall events? That soil got so hot that it crusted over, the rain landed on top, and it literally evaporated before it could infiltrate. So we lost a lot of those summer rainfall events just by having, bare soils. Then we start looking at our rooting depth. So where we had cover crops, our deepest roots were 48 inches, and most of our root activity was between 4 and 44 inches deep. Where we didn't have cover crops, our deepest was 40, and the most root activity was between 4 to 16 inches in depth. Think about that. We fed that corn crop where we had cover crops, and it was compaction. We have a natural compaction layer about 16, 18 inches deep. And we were able to address that with a cover crop and get roots deeper in the profile. And electric conductivity showed the same thing. Where we had cover crops and we had, less compaction, highest readings were 12 to 16 inches as the season progressed. Remember I told you we lose about 80% of that moisture in the top 4 inches, and we see that root zone switch to a deeper depth for fertility and water? Right here's how we do it. And then right here where we didn't, look at that, 4 to 8 inches. We had double the profile depth, 16 inches versus 8 inches. So we had double the amount of profile and nutrients and water to feed that corn crop. Corn trials for 2024. That deep injection bar that I showed y'all, we had the idea, let's see about the efficiency of dry fertilizer versus deep injection. It'll actually be on the show if Seth puts it in, but he came out in September, and we were so dry this summer we could actually still find fertilizer, the dry fertilizer. Some of it was still on top of the ground. Now obviously after the hurricane, I would imagine that finally got washed in or off. But at that point in time, we did dry fertilizer at 100% of recommendation was 135 bushels. Dry fertilizer at 150% was 152 bushels. Dry fertilizer at 200% was 168 bushels. Now where we ran our deep injection bar, instead of running MAP and potassium dry here, we switched to an 1137.0 and a KTS here. At 100% was 219 bushels. 75% of the recommendation was 193, and 50% was 176. So we literally cut 50% of the fertilizer off on the liquid and out yielded a 200% dry. Which one's more efficient? Now everybody tells me they don't run liquid because it costs more. Liquid's 40% more per pound of nutrient. That's right. But if I can cut back and increase efficiency over 200% with 50%, which one of those made more money? That's pretty point blank. Then we talk about beans. So I'm going to give y'all a forewarning here. This is probably one of the most controversial things I've ever done on my farm. And if you talk crap about me, I'm going to travel the world and talk crap about you. So I hope y'all enjoy this presentation. So I told you every year we do Haney test and Mealic in the same fields. The Haney is in green, Mealic is in yellow. We replicated these 5-acre plots across the field, and down here in red is the Haney program with my farm management. So I wanted to put my foliar sprays, my PGRs in the very bottom of this field on this area in the red. And so here's how it turned out. Early season planting, Haney's here on the left, Mealic 3 beans are on the right. Pretty big difference for that early of the season, right? Haney on the right, Mealic on the left. Even bigger of a difference as the season progressed. So this video says, here you go, Willie. So Willie I don't know if he still works for Word Labs, but Willie is an idiot, and y'all know about it now. And he said that there was no way to prove a difference. Do y'all see these beans right here where my finger's pointing? That's the last row of beans in the Haney test plot. And I'm standing in the Mealic plot. Now wait a minute, here it comes. Can y'all tell where the Haney test picks back up? Can y'all see that right there? Like, Ray Charles could see the difference. But they're on Facebook talking shit about me, how this don't matter, and the Haney test called for more fertilizer, and the Haney test should always call for less, and blah, 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 and I can't tell you what I told them on stage. But my point being is, does the Haney test always call for less fertilizer? No. More times than not, in unhealthy soils, Haney calls for more. Because if they're unhealthy and biologically inactive, do you have more nutrients? No. When we see soils get healthier, we see most of the Haney test call for less, but more than likely you'll still see phosphorus. Like if you're running Melic 3 like me right now, you'll still see a higher phosphorus number. So what happens is I made this online and I put a sign out there that said Rick Haney's plot. And what happened was in September he sprouted right there. And I said, Rick, just go pull some random plants. And so Rick goes and grabs some random plants, and Melic 3 is here on the left, and Haney's here on the right. And you can still see a difference in pod set, branching, plant height. This is Russell's farm management plan plus the Haney. Can y'all see a difference there? So here's the numbers. The Melic 3 plot made 37.56 bushels across the scale. The fertilizer applied was 22, 60, 60, 9S, and 0.25 boron, and this is the actual product we applied in their pounds. So one of the things that I learned from Lance is we were running Melic 3. Y'all remember Lance said that Melic 3 was built to extract all nutrients and give a recommendation on that, a blanket test? Well, we were putting boron out, and it was kind of like Dan was saying earlier. Well, if you go out here and put a quart of 10% out, that's probably not going to do a whole lot. And Melic 3 was calling for like 16 ounces of a 10% boron, and we would put it out, and then we would pull a tissue test, and it was never even at adequate. It was always below that. And so Lance started telling me about hot water extraction. It cost $4 to the farm, and we do hot water extraction with him, and it is always at least double what we see Melic recommend. Sometimes it's triple. And so on the Haney test here, we ran hot water extraction, and the Haney plot did 52.47 bushels to the acre. The fertilizer applied was a 21-70-30-7S. So look at that. Yes, Haney test called for 10 more pounds of phosphorus, but 30 pounds less of potassium, 2 pounds less of sulfur, and a quarter pound more of boron. And this is what we applied. So the return on investment from 37 to 56, even with the fertilizer change, we made $180 an acre net profit more with the Haney test than we did the Melic test. Does that sound uncalibrated? Not really.
Where's the sun drop?
It wasn't in the beans. Look at the Haney in my foliar program. First pass at V4, soy sauce, that's a really funny story for another time. It's a foliar fertilizer. Sweet Success is a sugar, Calbor, which is calcium and boron, our Insul algae, and 2 ounces of moly, and then our PGR. And then we came back at R3 and we did all of that again in different rates and a little bit of moly, and our 2 foliar passes with our PGRs and our algae added did 86.43. Now my county average in Catawba County, you've all got a phone, you can Google it. Our county average in corn is 100 to 125, and our county average on beans runs 28 to 35 every year. And that right there, I think, is one of the contributing factors that our state average in beans absolutely sucks, is because everybody's running Melic 3 and they're putting on too much potassium but not enough phosphorus. And that's probably, I mean, come to North Carolina and walk into somebody's field, pull a sample, see what you see. But I guarantee you that's probably one of the contributing factors. But the way that we're doing these efficient passes is, even with these 2 passes added up, our return on investment on the farm package over Haney, we made an additional $377 an acre, and our return on investment, actual net profit over Melic 3 was $558 an acre. Did we spend more money? Absolutely. Did I throw the kitchen sink at it? No. We pulled a tissue test, we ran a foliar script, we figured up how many ounces of products we needed, we added in some enhancers like the algae is helping with uptake, the Sweet Success, the sugar, is helping with our insect pressure, and we applied what we needed and a little bit of PGR. This is what the beans look like. If you've never seen 100+ bushel beans before, look at how we're stacking nodes. This is one of the reasons we're paying attention to PGRs. We're trying to keep these nodes tight, and this is the reason we're paying attention like calcium and potassium ratios. Look how tight those nodes are stacked. This is just some of our normal production beans. I mean, I can tell you from right there to there is an inch. This is a cool one. So we actually had we used to put a little bit less PGR on, and we had one farm we put a little bit more on, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And so this is how we've gotten to the 6-ounce rate, but this is July the 19th, and Heather probably hates it when I keep bringing all these plants in the house and leaving them in there for a month. But she hadn't kicked me out yet. So here's this same plant a month later. So look at the difference in that field from July the 19th to August the 19th. I mean, we can affect these plants with the hormones. Just a picture of me out in my Christmas tree soybean field before harvest. Out picking it. The state came out. We did our weighs and our measures. I think they ended up measuring this thing like 10 times. And we ended up at 117.1 bushels dry land. Y'all can do it too. Hell, y'all got better dirt than I do in Iowa or Illinois or Indiana. Like, there's ways to affect these changes. I'm happy to give you the advice or whatever you need. Same thing with beans. Y'all ever saw this chart before for beans? We're working on it at AgWise to adjust it a little bit, but this is every nutrient, 14 nutrients that beans need to grow during the entire season. And it's far enough away that you probably can't see it, and I know y'all have heard me talk about it before, but what's the highest needed nutrient in soybeans after R3? And there's only been one farmer ever that I've talked to that knew what I was talking about. Anybody got a guess? It's zinc. After R3, the highest nutrient needed in soybeans is zinc. So how many of you grow beans? What's your average seed size?
Seed size?
Yeah, seed size at harvest. 2,800, 3,200?
Probably 32.
3,200? Anybody else? Everybody else? That's pretty much the national average, 2,800 to 3,200. Huh? 25? So the reason zinc is so important, it's a chemical signal in that plant to move nutrients and moisture out of the stems and branches and into the seed. If we don't add any plants, if we don't add any pods, that right there is one of the biggest ways that we can affect yield in beans. How? Seed size. This right here, that's pretty much national average, 2,841 seeds per pound. This is just where we added our deep injection, and we went down to 1,736, and right here, this is the ticket that we've been working on. No, those are not soybean or pinto beans, that's actually soybeans. But we were at 1,359 seeds per pound, where we're following that program of putting at least 1 to 1.25 ppm on a tissue test of zinc per expected bushel. And we can make it change with every ppm of that zinc that we're going up and down. How much did we spend on it? $3 an acre. We're buying an unchelated zinc sulfate. It's going to be foliar sprayed. We're not soil applying it, so you don't have to buy the expensive $42 a gallon stuff. This stuff right here was roughly about $9 a gallon. And we're running a quart to 2 quarts. Now, we've refined that now with our foliar scripts, and it'll tell us, like you saw in that one picture, of how many ounces we actually need. But at the end of the day, if you're going to spend the difference between $2 and $3 an acre, does it really matter? Like, these are things that we can do to affect yield in beans that doesn't cost a lot of money. How do we do it? We do it with our ground rig. Fortunately now, I hated driving across beans. Even if I'm running an RTK line, those beans are going to fill that gap back in within about a week. And we started studying, and every time we made a pass over beans, we were losing about 1.2 to 1.4 bushels per pass per acre. That doesn't really seem like a lot, but say you make a post pass with herbicide, maybe we have to make an insecticide pass if there's an insect problem. Maybe we make 2 foliar passes. Well, right there, I'm already over 6 bushels of beans. And that's really not a lot of management. So then we started looking at drones. Then we started looking at drones and efficiency. So Texas Earth has a product called BioNectar Dry. It's essentially a dry compost tea that we can buy, a 5-gallon bucket. I think we're doing like 40 acres with. It's cheap to ship it to me. We're doing compost teas, our foliars. We're doing that with the drones now, the T40s, T50s, looking at some newer ones. But essentially what we've been looking at is from 2019 to 2023. I haven't got to put this year's numbers together for 24 yet. But for every dollar that we're investing in foliar applications and correcting these nutrient deficiencies in the plants, it's paying back $2 for every dollar we spent. That's worth doing. And so Lance talked about T&D, and this was off of our high contest plot. Let's look at potassium. Top 6 inches, 6,000 pounds of potassium, 1,000 pounds of phosphorus, almost 3,000 pounds of nitrogen. If you haven't ran a T&D, it's worth trying. And pull them in depth. We're doing 0 to 6 and 6 to 12. So look right here on the 6 to 12, almost 2,000 pounds of nitrogen, 720 pounds of phosphorus, 5,500 pounds of potassium. Between our 0 to 6 and our 6 to 12, we've got about 13,000 pounds of potassium. Do you think we need any more? We just need to learn how to utilize it and unlock it. So if you haven't followed us, this is the Top Crop TV crew. We've got an app. We're on social media. A lot of the things I talked about today, we show in season what we're doing, how we're trying to be sustainable, how we're trying to regenerate soils. You've got Corey, Dan, and Shelby. We didn't get Ethan in the picture, but he's kind of bashful sometimes, I think. But anyways, y'all got any questions? Y'all might feel like that right now, but the snozberries were delicious. I understand what you're saying. So he's asking, the question is on our tissue test, are they going off of what the yield level is? Or yield goal is for setting that recommendation? No, because the university levels suck. Over the last 5 years, they have essentially compiled data, and we've looked at, our sufficiency ranges and ratios and the stuff that's in the AI program is not what you're going to see at the university. And you're going to see some weird stuff like, we'll take zinc, for instance. If you run foliar script as the season progresses in soybeans, you'll see zinc recommendations continue to go up. And it's not necessarily based on an 80 bushel yield goal, but it's based on the fact that we know that that plant needs a certain level of zinc. And if you're not at that level, it'll continue to go up. Now, if you have to kind of put everything in a broad stroke, if your farm's going to go for 100 bushel beans, then you need to understand to remember what I told the whole entire crowd. You want 1 to 1.25 parts per million zinc per expected bushel. At the same time, you can't build a program that's going to be sufficient on every single farm and every different farm, but you have to hit as big of an area that you can. So there's things, if you want to try it out, feel free to reach out, and I'll help you if you have a certain yield goal.
So you are coming up with your own critical levels, right?
Yeah.
Got one back here. You talked about basically a delayed response in corn. You got to apply a B4 to get the B6 response. Is it the same in beans?
It depends on how you apply it in beans. So like we've been playing around the last 2 seasons with Y dropping in beans, and Y dropping in beans showed a fairly fast response. On broadcasting, like we tried to broadcast some like potassium sulfate and some AMS over the top of beans, it took like 5, 6, 7 days for it started showing up in those tissues. Now foliars, on the other hand, are a little bit different. You can foliar a bean crop and you'll typically see a response within about a 20 hour period. If you're foliaring beans, it really depends on, like if you're spraying like a calcium, a double positive bond calcium, that does not move well in beans at all. And so that's where we start using those efficiency products where we're either using like fulvic acids, or we'll put like 2 to 4 ounces of the algae because it has such a small micron size that it'll actually take some of that calcium in and help move it into the plant. So it depends on the product too.
We'll take about 2 more questions. Who's got a hand up? Just looking.
Got one over here on the right.
Oh, we got one in the back. Yes, sir.
When you're taking the tissue tests to base for the scripts, say it's a 50-acre field, how many tissue tests are you taking, or
I guess, how many?
What's the composite?
Is in for that sample or whatnot to base that strip off of?
That's kind of the same answer here that he was asking about, like timing. It depends on what you're looking at. So I've got a small drone that I can do NDVI. If I go fly a field and I'm seeing fairly consistent NDVI, I'll pull a composite over that whole field. And essentially the way I do my composites is I walk left to right at an angle in the field so we don't hit a hot pass or any kind of overlap with fertility or fungus, like a foliar pass. If we're flying NDVI and we see a spot or a strip that's different, then we can pull that sample area out and we'll pull a corrective sample just in that bad area and see what it needs, and then we'll have the rest of the field in its own sample. And then that way I'm doing a blanket approach over the bigger area of the field that looked correct on NDVI, but then we can spot treat and change up whatever we're going to apply in that bad area. There's no right or wrong to this. I mean, if you're in Nebraska and you've got a 120 acre field that's as flat as the floor in this room and a single soil type, I would say on a 120 acre pivot like that, you would probably at least want to be down to like 3 40 acre samples. And that's still not a lot of money. I mean, you're talking $1.50 an acre. I mean, why not just break that up and be able to have 3 treatments in 40 acres? That's what I recommend.
Last question, you in the middle. Yep.
For the late season application, are you going to be in a foliar, are you going to be more focused on trying to save a problem area or push a good area?
Late season, like once we get later in the season, if it's a problem area, you're probably not going to get that to turn around at that point. I would be more focused on the offensive. Like I said, if you have moisture and you have good weather, I'm more wanting to push than I am trying to save, because if you've went through a whole season and you've had problem after problem after problem, that late rescue pass at R2, R3 is not going to make up for an entire beginning of the season being junk. But if you've had a good season and you've balanced that plant, I would push it and focus pushing in the later part of the season. Does that help? Well, listen, I appreciate y'all's time. I'll be around. I think I might actually stay up here for Sam and help him with the drones, but thank y'all for your time this morning.